All right, there's more breaking news we're following. Now at least 4 Republicans have joined in with a Democratic effort to force a vote on extending those soon-to-expire enhanced Obamacare subsidies. Let's go live to CNN's chief congressional correspondent, Manu Raju, who's up on Capitol Hill. This is a big rebuke of the House Speaker, Mike Johnson. What else can you tell us?
Yeah, a major rebuke. Remember, this typically does not succeed in the House of Representatives to force a vote on an issue in which the leadership opposes. But this has happened time and time again to Speaker Mike Johnson, even though he is adamantly opposed to extending those expiring subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, something he says that simply should not happen because of his concerns with the current legislation. He's moving forward on a narrow health care package later today that does not extend those subsidies. But just moments ago, 4 Republicans in the House of Representatives signed on to a Democratic effort to force a bill to extend those subsidies for 3 years. Those 4 Republicans are from swing districts. 3 of them are from Pennsylvania. Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, a swing district Republican, one of just 3 Republicans who sit in districts that Kamala Harris won in 2024. Also, Mike Lawler of New York, another one of those Republicans in a swing district, and 2 other Pennsylvania Republicans, Rob Bresnahan and Ryan McKenzie, making it official that there are 218 votes on this signature, on this petition, which means that this bill will come to the floor probably in January, which will still be after those subsidies expire. It would still have to pass the United States Senate, but also this very significant rebuke of the Speaker of the House. I caught up with some of those members who are very frustrated at the opposition of the leader, of the Speaker, including Congressman Mike Lawler, who didn't mince words about the Speaker's handling of this issue.
All right, everyone, we've got breaking news that represents a major rebuke of House Speaker Mike Johnson, and it shows that even some Republicans are recognizing that letting enhanced Obamacare subsidies expire would be a political and humanitarian disaster. At least 4 Republicans have joined with a Democratic effort to force a vote on extending the soon-to-expire enhanced Obamacare subsidies. This is huge, and we need to break down exactly what's happening and why it matters for millions of Americans. CNN's chief congressional correspondent Manu Raju reported from Capitol Hill that this is a major rebuke of the Speaker. Remember, this typically does not succeed in the House of Representatives, forcing a vote on an issue that leadership opposes. But this has happened time and time again to Speaker Mike Johnson. Even though Johnson is adamantly opposed to extending those expiring subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, something he says simply should not happen because of his concerns with the current legislation, he's moving forward on a narrow healthcare package later today that does not extend those subsidies. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. But just moments ago, 4 Republicans in the House signed on to a Democratic effort to force a vote to extend those subsidies for 3 years. Those 4 Republicans are from swing districts. 3 of them are from Pennsylvania. Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, a swing district Republican who is one of just 3 Republicans sitting in districts that Kamala Harris won in 2024. Also, Mike Lawler of New York, another one of those Republicans in a swing district, and 2 other Pennsylvania Republicans, Rob Bresnahan and Ryan McKenzie. This makes it official that there are now 218 votes on this discharge petition, which means this bill will come to the floor probably in January. Now, that will still be after those subsidies expire, which is a problem, and it would still have to pass the United States Senate. But this is still a very significant rebuke of the Speaker of the House. Manu Raju caught up with some of those members who are very frustrated at the opposition from Speaker Johnson, including Congressman Mike Lawler, who did not mince words about the Speaker's handling of this issue. Lawler said, "This is absolute bullshit, and it's absurd that we are in a body with 435 members. Everybody has a responsibility to serve their district, to serve their constituents." When asked what he would say to the Speaker, who is not going to give them a vote on this issue, Lawler responded, "That's a failure of leadership. We have members on both sides who believe this is an urgent issue, and it is for all of our members in terms of what their constituents are going to have to deal with at the start of the new year. So what's wrong with having a vote?" That last comment came from Congressman Kevin Kiley, who represents a swing district in California. He hasn't yet signed on to the effort to force a vote, but you can expect him and others to likely vote yes when this measure comes to the floor in mid-January, meaning it could pass by a comfortable majority in the House. But ultimately, the question will be what the Senate decides to do. The House will probably pass this in January, but then it goes to the United States Senate, where Republicans have already voted to block a Democratic effort to extend those subsidies for 3 years. Will this pressure any Republicans to change their positions? There are ongoing bipartisan negotiations to try to deal with this issue in the Senate, but no doubt this is a sign of growing angst and pressure from rank-and-file members, particularly swing district members, at this key moment for the Speaker ahead of the midterms next year. When a Republican congressman was asked about this breaking news, his response was telling. He said these are obviously Republicans in swing districts who may be threatened in the midterm elections. There are apparently a sufficient number of signatories to the discharge petition to allow it to come to the floor. In fact, it must come to the floor, probably after the holiday season in January. His prediction is that with a sufficient number of Republicans signing on, it would pass the House. But he doesn't think the fate in the Senate will be very good. He doesn't think the Senate would pass it. When asked if he would vote for it, this Republican congressman said, "I've opposed Obamacare my entire career. I don't believe in a government-run subsidy program. I think we need more competition and choice in a private healthcare system. I'll probably vote no." And certainly signing a discharge petition is very traumatic, breaks from leadership and the committee process. I've never signed one myself, but I do understand these members who are in tough districts, and it's a big issue for them back home. That response perfectly captures Republican hypocrisy on this issue. He admits these subsidies are a huge issue for millions of Americans whose healthcare costs are going to skyrocket unless Congress acts. He admits the members forcing this vote are doing it because it's critical for their constituents. But he's still going to vote no because of ideology, because he's opposed Obamacare his entire career, because he doesn't believe in government subsidies even when they're literally keeping millions of Americans from losing healthcare coverage. He even admits that when the subsidies expire at the end of the month, we're going to see a reaction from the American people. Translation: Republicans know this is going to be a political disaster for them. They know millions of people are going to lose affordable health care. They know voters are going to be furious. But their ideology is more important than people's lives or their political survival. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, a Democrat from New Hampshire, was asked about this development. She said, "It's very good news to see the House take action. One concern in the Senate has been that they could pass something, but if Speaker Johnson continues to take the position that he's not going to take anything up, then it's dead on arrival when it gets to the House." So the fact that the House has a bipartisan discharge petition that they're going to hopefully get signed by enough members to get legislation to the floor is very good news. Senator Shaheen said there are bipartisan talks continuing in the Senate right now that have been constructive. She hopes everybody understands the situation is urgent, that people are facing this deadline. It's not likely they'll get something done before the holidays, but there's a commitment to come back and get something done when they return. Let me pause here because this is important. Not before the holidays means these subsidies technically expire at the end of the year. Senator Shaheen acknowledged there's a couple weeks of a mushy period at the beginning of January where maybe they can still get some action before people feel it. But this basically means it won't get done before Congress goes away for the holidays. When asked what the contours of a deal might look like, Shaheen said there's recognition that doing anything beyond a clean extension in the first year is very difficult. But they're thinking about a clean extension in the first year and then in the second year, doing a number of things that will help address the cost of healthcare. Because in addition to helping people with premium costs, Congress really needs to look at the ongoing increasing cost of healthcare and what can be done to address that. Shaheen mentioned there are a number of bipartisan proposals that have been through both houses but haven't been taken up and signed into law. She thinks several of those would help address costs of prescription drugs. For example, doing something about pharmacy benefit managers, looking at how to provide savings to people without having insurance companies take a cut out of that is important. There's lots of work that needs to be done, and she's hopeful there seems to be much more of a bipartisan commitment to address it. So let's break down what's really happening here. Enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies that help millions of Americans afford health insurance are set to expire at the end of this month. If they expire, healthcare costs are going to skyrocket for those millions of people. Many will lose coverage entirely because they won't be able to afford the increased premiums. Mike Johnson and House Republican leadership don't want to extend these subsidies. Their ideology says government shouldn't subsidize health care, even though private market competition has completely failed to make health care affordable for most Americans. So Johnson is moving forward with a narrow health care package that doesn't extend the subsidies, essentially letting them expire. But 4 Republicans from swing districts recognized this is political suicide. Their constituents need these subsidies. Millions of Americans in their districts will lose affordable health care if the subsidies expire. So they've broken with leadership and signed on to a Democratic discharge petition to force a vote on extending the subsidies for 3 years. A discharge petition is a rarely used procedural tool that allows a majority of House members to force a vote on legislation, even if leadership opposes it. It requires 218 signatures. These 4 Republicans joining with all House Democrats gives them exactly 218, meaning this vote will happen whether Mike Johnson wants it or not. This is a massive rebuke of the Speaker. Mike Lawler calling Johnson's opposition absolute bullshit and a failure of leadership is not normal. Republicans don't typically break ranks like this, and certainly don't publicly trash their own Speaker. But the political stakes are too high. These swing district Republicans know that if they let these subsidies expire, they're going to get destroyed in the midterms. The vote will probably happen in January, which means the subsidies will technically expire first, but there's apparently a window where they can still be restored retroactively before people really feel the impact. The bigger question is what happens in the Senate. Senate Republicans have already voted to block extending these subsidies, but will this House action, with Republicans breaking ranks, pressure Senate Republicans to change their votes? There are bipartisan negotiations happening, which suggests some Senate Republicans might be open to a deal. But it's far from certain, and here's the cynical political calculation happening. Republicans know letting these subsidies expire is going to hurt millions of Americans and be a political disaster for them. But their base hates Obamacare. Their donors oppose government health care programs. Their ideology says private market competition is the answer, even though it's clearly not. So House Republican leadership wanted to just let the subsidies expire and blame Democrats. But swing district Republicans recognized they'd be the ones blamed by their constituents who lose coverage. So they're forcing a vote to protect themselves politically, even if it means breaking with leadership. The Republican congressman who said he'll vote no, even though he understands why swing district members are doing this perfectly, captures the party's dilemma: ideology versus reality, base versus general election voters, what they believe versus what actually helps people. And notice how he framed it. He doesn't believe in government-run subsidy programs and thinks we need more competition and choice in a private healthcare system. That's Republican healthcare policy in a nutshell. Magical thinking that if we just eliminate government programs and regulations, the private market will somehow make healthcare affordable and accessible for everyone. We've tried that. It doesn't work. That's why we have the Affordable Care Act in the first place. Before Obamacare, insurance companies could deny coverage for pre-existing conditions, charge whatever they wanted, and kick people off plans when they got sick. The private market failed spectacularly to provide affordable health care. The ACA, with its subsidies and regulations, has expanded coverage to millions of Americans who previously couldn't afford insurance. But Republicans still cling to this fantasy that private market competition is the answer. They oppose government subsidies on principle, even when those subsidies are literally the only thing keeping millions of people from losing healthcare coverage. That's ideology over human lives. Mike Lawler is right that this is a failure of leadership. Mike Johnson should be working to extend these subsidies, not blocking a vote. Every member of Congress has a responsibility to serve their constituents, and millions of constituents need these subsidies extended. What's wrong with having a vote? If Republicans really believe extending subsidies is bad policy, let them vote against it and defend that position to voters. But denying members even the opportunity to vote is cowardly. The fact that Johnson is being forced to allow this vote through a discharge petition shows how weak his speakership has become. This has happened repeatedly to him. He can't control his caucus. Swing district members know they can't afford to follow leadership off a political cliff, so they're breaking ranks to protect themselves. And this is going to keep happening as we get closer to midterms. Republican leadership wants to pursue ideological purity, but members in competitive districts need to win re-election. That tension is only going to intensify, and we're going to see more defections and more discharge petitions as swing district Republicans distance themselves from unpopular leadership positions. The question now is whether the Senate will act. Senator Shaheen sounds cautiously optimistic that bipartisan negotiations are making progress. But Senate Republicans have been pretty united in opposing extension. Will this House action change any minds? Will the political pressure from constituents who are about to lose healthcare coverage force Senate Republicans to reconsider? We're about to find out. And millions of Americans' access to affordable healthcare depends on the answer. If Congress fails to extend these subsidies, we're going to see premium increases that price millions of people out of coverage. We're going to see families choosing between healthcare and other necessities. We're going to see people delaying medical care because they can't afford it. And we're going to see the uninsured rate spike for the first time in years. All of this is preventable. Congress can extend these subsidies. The House is going to vote to do exactly that in January. The question is whether the Senate will follow suit or whether Republican ideology will win out over millions of Americans' healthcare needs. Stay tuned to this story, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss updates, and contact your senators, especially if they're Republicans, and demand they support extending these subsidies. Millions of Americans are counting on Congress to act, and we need to make sure they hear from us loudly and clearly that healthcare is more important than ideology.